Hello brothers and welcome to Sigma Grandpa channel. The less you explain yourself, the more people are forced to decide what you mean. And that is where things get interesting. Because if you are the kind of man who doesn't constantly announce what he's thinking, doesn't chase every conversation, doesn't need a room full of people to validate him, and can sit quietly without desperately reaching for his phone every 6 seconds, some women may behave differently around you. Not necessarily because you're some mysterious superhero descended from the mountains. Sometimes you're just quiet. But here's the strange part. People hate empty spaces in communication. When they don't have enough information, the human mind naturally tries to fill in the blanks. And when a woman can't immediately figure out what a man is thinking, feeling, or intending, she may start paying more attention to him, not less. She may tease you more. She may suddenly become unusually talkative. She may watch your reactions when she thinks you're not noticing. She may pull closer, then suddenly create distance. She may even act completely normal around everyone else and strangely unpredictable around you. And no, that doesn't automatically mean she's secretly obsessed with you. Let's not give ourselves a trophy before the race starts. Sometimes you're genuinely intriguing. Sometimes you're simply difficult to read. And sometimes, here's the uncomfortable possibility, you aren't mysterious at all. You may just be emotionally unavailable, socially awkward, or giving off signals you don't realize you're sending. That distinction matters, because the real question isn't simply, why do women act weird around Sigma males? The better question is, what exactly are they reacting to? Your silence, your attention, your lack of reaction, the fact that you notice things without commenting on them, or perhaps the uncomfortable feeling that they can't easily predict what you'll do next. Today, we're going much deeper than the usual recycled advice about being alpha, mysterious or unbothered. We're looking at the subtle behaviors that can make a woman suddenly change her entire social rhythm around a man. And some of them may reveal things about you that you never noticed. Because sometimes the most confusing person in the room isn't the woman acting strangely. It's the man who doesn't realize what his presence is doing to the room. Number 1, your silence makes her unsure whether she is being judged. Silence can become surprisingly loud when nobody knows what it means. A Sigma-type man may sit quietly, listen carefully, and give very little away through his face or body language. He isn't necessarily judging anyone. He may simply be thinking, observing, or enjoying the conversation without feeling the need to react to every sentence. But from the other person's perspective, that calmness can create a strange question. What is he thinking right now? That question can change the entire interaction. She tells a joke and checks your face. She shares an opinion and watches your reaction. She says something slightly embarrassing and suddenly wonders whether you noticed. The funny part is that you might not have been analyzing her at all. You could be thinking about what to eat later, but because you don't immediately provide emotional feedback, she has to interpret the silence herself. And humans are terrible at leaving blanks empty. We fill them. Sometimes she assumes you're impressed. Sometimes she assumes you're unimpressed. Sometimes she assumes you've noticed something she hoped you wouldn't. That's where the weird behavior begins. She may talk more, explain herself unnecessarily, become unusually playful, or suddenly become careful with her words. Your silence didn't accuse her of anything. It simply gave her enough space to hear her own assumptions. Number 2, your reaction to her tests is not what she expected. Sometimes the strangest reaction isn't a reaction at all. A woman may tease you, make a slightly provocative comment, take longer to reply, casually mention another man, or suddenly become a little distant. Not every one of these things is a deliberate test, of course. People have moods, habits, and bad communication days. But when someone is quietly checking how much influence they have over you, your response can tell them far more than your words ever could. And this is where a calm man can become difficult to predict. You don't immediately become jealous. You don't start demanding explanations. You don't suddenly double your messages because her attention disappeared. You simply continue with your day. That can be surprisingly unsettling. She expected movement. Instead, she got consistency. She expected you to chase the conversation. You didn't. She expected you to defend your position. You simply let the comment pass. Suddenly, she has less information than she thought she would have. The interesting part is that you don't need to win these moments. In fact, trying to prove that you're impossible to manipulate can become another form of insecurity. Real composure looks much simpler. You notice the behavior, decide whether it matters, and respond according to your own standards. Sometimes the strongest response isn't a clever comeback. It's refusing to become a different person just because someone changed their behavior. Number 3, you remember tiny details. You never mentioned remembering. One of the most unsettling forms of attention is the kind that doesn't announce itself. A Sigma-type man may remember tiny details from conversations that most people would completely forget. Not because he's keeping a mental database of every woman he meets, but because when something genuinely interests him, he actually listens. He might remember the name of her childhood friend, the strange food she refuses to eat, the job she once said she wanted, or the small problem she casually mentioned weeks ago. Then, one ordinary day, he brings it up. That's when she may pause. Wait, how do you remember that? The answer might be simple. You were listening. But being genuinely listened to can feel surprisingly intense, especially when the person listening isn't constantly interrupting, reacting, or trying to impress you. She may suddenly realize that while she thought she was having a casual conversation, you were quietly taking in details she didn't even realize she had revealed. And here's the part that makes it different. You don't necessarily use those details to gain approval. You simply remember them. That can make your attention feel unusually deliberate. She may start wondering what else you've noticed, not because you're playing detective, not because you're trying to appear mysterious, but because you paid attention when everyone else was simply waiting for their turn to speak. Number 4, you don't give her the emotional feedback she was expecting. Some people don't just communicate with words. They communicate by watching your reaction. A woman may tell a funny story and expect you to laugh. She may change her hairstyle and expect you to notice. She may tease you and wait for you to tease her back. She may casually reveal something personal and look for a certain expression on your face. But what happens when your reaction is simply calm? That can create confusion. You might genuinely enjoy what she said without putting on a performance. You might notice the new hairstyle without immediately making a big announcement about it. You might understand the teasing without feeling the need to prove anything in return. Suddenly she has less emotional information to work with, and that can make her start checking again. She may repeat the joke. Ask, "Are you okay?" Look at your face a little longer. Change the subject and then circle back. Sometimes she isn't even consciously doing it. She's simply trying to figure out whether her words are reaching you. The mistake is assuming that being emotionally controlled means being emotionally cold. It doesn't. You can be warm without becoming predictable. You can enjoy someone's company without reacting dramatically to everything they do. And that's what makes this dynamic so interesting. When your emotions aren't constantly displayed on the surface, people may start paying closer attention to the smallest things you actually do reveal. Number 5, your attention has an off switch. One of the strangest things about a genuinely self-directed man is that his attention doesn't stay permanently attached to another person. When he's engaged with you, he's fully there. He listens, responds, remembers details, and gives you his attention without constantly checking his phone or looking around for something better. but when the conversation ends, he can return to his own world just as naturally. That sudden shift can be confusing. One minute you're receiving his complete attention. The next, he's focused on his work, his plans, his interests, or simply enjoying his own space. There's no dramatic announcement, no cold shoulder, no attempt to make you jealous. His attention simply moves, and that can make someone wonder, did I suddenly do something wrong? Sometimes nothing happened. That's the important distinction. A man who doesn't depend on constant interaction doesn't need to manufacture distance to appear valuable. He can genuinely enjoy someone's presence without needing continuous access to it. This can feel unusual in a world where attention is often treated like currency. People expect quick replies, constant updates, instant reactions, and endless availability. When someone doesn't operate that way, their attention can feel more noticeable precisely because it isn't unlimited. But there's a fine line. Healthy independence isn't ignoring someone to make them chase you. It's being present when you're present and having a life when you're not. Your attention becomes meaningful because you don't hand it out simply because someone expects it. Number 6, you can make her feel more visible by saying less. Sometimes saying less makes people reveal more. A Sigma-type man may not flood a conversation with questions, opinions, and stories about himself. Instead, he listens carefully and occasionally asks one simple question that goes straight past the surface. She says, "Work has been stressful." Most people might respond, "Yeah, work is stressful." But you might ask, is the work actually stressful, or is it the people there? Suddenly, the conversation changes. That one question can make her stop and think, because you notice something underneath her words. You didn't interrogate her. You didn't pretend to be a therapist. You simply paid attention. This can make someone feel unusually seen, and being seen isn't always comfortable. People often control how much they reveal by keeping conversations on safe, predictable ground. But when someone listens closely enough to notice the little inconsistencies, the pauses, or the things left unsaid, that comfortable surface can disappear. She may start wondering how much you've already picked up. The irony is that you may not be trying to read her at all. You may simply be genuinely curious rather than waiting impatiently for your turn to speak. That's what makes this behavior powerful. You aren't dominating the conversation. You're creating enough space for the other person to hear herself more clearly, and sometimes that reveals far more than you ever asked to know. Number 7, you don't rush to correct her impression of you. Most people care deeply about being understood correctly. If someone misunderstands them, they immediately explain. They clarify the joke, defend the intention, prove they aren't rude, arrogant, jealous, or uninterested. They want to control the picture another person has of them. A self-assured man may handle it differently. If she assumes he's quiet because he's upset, he doesn't necessarily rush to convince her otherwise. If she thinks he's difficult to impress, he doesn't start performing to prove that he's actually friendly. If she misunderstands one small thing about him, he may simply let the moment pass. That can be surprisingly confusing, because now she has to live with uncertainty. Maybe I got him wrong. And uncertainty creates curiosity. The key is that this isn't about deliberately acting mysterious. That's where many men get it completely wrong. Pretending not to care, giving vague answers, or intentionally confusing someone isn't confidence. It's performance. The real difference is that you don't believe every misunderstanding deserves a courtroom defense. You know who you are. And you don't need every person to leave the conversation with a perfectly accurate biography of you. Sometimes you explain yourself when it matters. Sometimes you let people misunderstand something harmless. And that quiet willingness to say, they'll think what they think, can make you far more difficult to manipulate than constantly trying to manage someone's opinion of you. Number 8, you notice contradictions instead of just listening to words. Some people listen to what you say. Others quietly notice whether your behavior agrees with it. That difference can completely change an interaction. A Sigma-type man may not interrupt someone to point out every contradiction. He simply notices. She says she doesn't care, yet keeps checking for your reaction. She says she's relaxed, yet her body language becomes tense when a certain subject comes up. She says something doesn't bother her, then returns to the same subject 5 minutes later. You don't necessarily call her out. You just register it. And that can feel strangely intense, because most people are comfortable when their words are accepted at face value. They aren't always prepared for someone who pays attention to the gap between what they say and what they repeatedly do. The important part is restraint. Not every contradiction means someone is lying. People are complicated. Someone can genuinely believe they're fine while still behaving like they're bothered. Human beings contradict themselves constantly. A perceptive man understands that. So instead of turning every inconsistency into an accusation, he watches for patterns. That changes everything. He isn't trying to catch her in a lie. He's trying to understand what is actually happening. And when she realizes that you aren't merely hearing her words, but quietly comparing them with her behavior, she may become more careful around you. Not because you're intimidating, but because you notice what most people are too distracted to notice. Number 9, you can make ordinary conversation feel like an interrogation without trying. Sometimes it isn't the number of questions you ask, it's the question you choose to ask. A casual conversation can suddenly become surprisingly personal when a man refuses to stop at the obvious answer. Someone says, "I love my job," and instead of simply agreeing, he asks, "What part of it do you actually enjoy?" That tiny shift can change everything. Now she's no longer giving the easy answer, she's thinking. Maybe she starts explaining that she loves the freedom, not the job itself. Maybe she admits she's staying because she's afraid to start over. Maybe she realizes she hasn't even asked herself that question before. And suddenly the conversation feels deeper than either person expected. The strange part is that you may not be trying to uncover anything. You're simply interested in the reason behind the reason. You don't need 20 questions. Sometimes one thoughtful question is enough to move past someone's social script. That can make a woman unusually aware of herself around you. She may start choosing her words more carefully because she realizes you're actually listening to the answer, not just waiting for your opportunity to speak. But there is a crucial difference between curiosity and interrogation. A perceptive man doesn't keep digging when someone clearly wants privacy. He knows when to ask and when to leave something alone. The real power isn't making someone uncomfortable. It's making ordinary conversation honest without forcing it to become something deeper. Number 10. You don't seem impressed by the things that usually impress people. There is something strangely revealing about a man who doesn't become excited simply because everyone else is excited. A woman may mention someone's expensive car, impressive job title, social connections, designer clothes, or huge online following, expecting the usual reaction. But you might simply nod and continue the conversation. Not because you're jealous or trying to act superior, but because those things genuinely aren't enough to earn your respect. That can be confusing. People often use status as social shorthand. If everyone admires something, we're tempted to assume it must be impressive. But a man who judges people by how they think, behave, treat others, handle pressure, or keep their word can seem almost impossible to impress with surface-level achievements. And this can make a woman curious. She may start wondering, so what actually impresses him? That question can change how she interacts with you. Instead of showing you what looks impressive to everyone else, She may start revealing more personal things, her intelligence, humor, values, talents, or ambitions. But there is an important line here. Not being impressed doesn't mean disrespecting people who have achieved something. A secure man can recognize success without worshiping it. That's the difference. You aren't trying to prove that you're above the room. You simply don't confuse a person's price tag, popularity, or position with their actual character. And people can sense when their usual shortcuts aren't working on you. Number 11, you sometimes withdraw before there is a problem. Some men don't wait for a relationship to become a complete mess before admitting something feels wrong. They notice small changes early. The conversations become forced. The same disagreement keeps returning. Boundaries are repeatedly ignored. The emotional energy starts feeling heavier than the connection itself. Instead of creating a dramatic confrontation, a self-directed man may quietly step back. That can confuse a woman because she may still believe everything is fine. There was no huge argument, no angry announcement, no dramatic goodbye. He simply became less available, and that silence can leave questions hanging in the air. What changed? Sometimes nothing dramatic happened. That's precisely the point. He may have decided that the pattern was enough information. This doesn't mean every man who withdraws is emotionally mature. Avoiding difficult conversations can also be cowardice disguised as peace. A man who disappears whenever things become uncomfortable isn't necessarily independent. He may simply lack the communication skills to deal with conflict. The difference is whether the withdrawal has purpose. A mature man can step back without turning it into punishment. He doesn't disappear to make someone panic or chase him. He creates distance because he has recognized that continuing the same dynamic isn't good for him. And that can feel unusual to someone accustomed to endless second chances. Sometimes the most unexpected thing about a man isn't how quickly he walks away, but how quietly he decides that he has seen enough. Number 12, you don't seem afraid of awkward silence. Silence becomes interesting when one person refuses to rescue it. Many people feel an almost automatic need to fill quiet moments. They ask another question, make a joke, check their phone, or suddenly remember something completely unnecessary to say. A self-assured man may simply sit there and let the silence exist. That can make the other person unusually aware of herself. She may start wondering whether she said something wrong. She may suddenly become conscious of her expression, her posture, or the last thing she said. Meanwhile, you may be perfectly comfortable. You're not trying to create tension. You're not playing some mysterious game. You simply don't believe every quiet moment needs to be repaired. And that can be surprisingly attractive because comfort with silence often signals that you're not desperately seeking approval. You don't need constant conversation to prove that everything is going well. But there's another side to it. Silence can also expose nervousness. When someone isn't rushing to speak, you get more time to notice what happens next. Does she start talking faster? Laugh unnecessarily? Change the subject? Become more relaxed? You may learn more from that pause than you would from another 10 minutes of small talk. The trick is not to weaponize silence. Don't stare someone down or deliberately create uncomfortable pauses just to appear powerful. Real confidence is much simpler. You don't panic when the conversation temporarily has nothing to say. The real reason she acts different around you. At the end of the day, being difficult to read isn't what makes a man interesting. What truly changes the dynamic is the way he carries himself when nobody is watching. You listen without needing to dominate the conversation. You notice details without announcing that you're watching. You don't panic when someone misunderstands you. You don't automatically react to every tease, emotional shift, or attempt to pull your attention in a different direction. You can enjoy someone's presence without becoming dependent on it, and you can walk away from unhealthy situations without turning the exit into a performance. But here's the part worth remembering. Not every strange reaction means she's fascinated by you. Sometimes she's interested. Sometimes she's nervous. Sometimes she's simply trying to understand you. And sometimes you're the one misreading the situation. That's why real self-awareness matters more than the Sigma label. Don't become obsessed with appearing mysterious. Don't manufacture silence. Don't ignore women just to make them chase you. Don't confuse emotional unavailability with strength. Be observant, but stay human. Be confident, but remain approachable. Have boundaries, but communicate when communication matters. Because the most compelling man isn't the one who makes everyone wonder what he's thinking. He's the man who knows exactly who he is without needing everyone else to understand him. And if you enjoyed this perspective, subscribe for more thought-provoking videos like this. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if something in this video made you recognize a behavior in yourself, don't ignore it. Sometimes the most interesting thing you can discover isn't why other people act strangely around you. It's what their reactions reveal about you.